His canyon walls carry my tune. The only one to hear my song are the coyotes and the wolves. But if I drink enough of this flask, I can hear them sing your song too.
Hi, this is Robert Leiterman with the Bluff Creek Project. I'm here with Rowdy Kelley, also of the Bluff Creek Project. We've been trying something a little bit different. We're doing podcasts out in the woods at different locations in the Bluff Creek area. I've done several already. Now I'm with Rowdy Kelley at Louse Camp. A lot of history here at Louse Camp, and we'll kind of get into a little bit of that first. But first, I want Rowdy to just give a quick rundown on who he was and his involvement in the Bluff Creek Project. Say, hey, Rowdy, go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll start from there.
Well, you already said my name, Rowdy Kelley of the Bluff Creek Project. Robert introduced me to the idea of rediscovering the film site in 2011.
Yeah, 2011.
2011, through a BFRO expedition that I was on to actually scout for finding Bigfoot that was going to start shooting 2 weeks after. So I knew that they wanted to go to the film site, so I called up Robert. I said, Robert, what do you know about Bluff Creek and Bluff Creek, the film site for the Patterson Gimlin film? He's like, hey, I got a BFRO expedition that's coming. Why don't you come as my guest and you'll get some exposure to it? And I was like, heck yeah, okay, let's go do that. And in turn, that kind of led me into meeting Steven, and you guys pinned me down one night on the BFRO expedition and started showing me a book that had all these pictures. I think it was Christopher Murphy's.
Yeah, Christopher Murphy, Meet the Sasquatch.
Meet the Sasquatch.
Know the Sasquatch is his second book, which is out in, I want to say 2010. Meet the Sasquatch was out in 2005.
And I was extremely impressed with the still frames that were in the book. And you guys said, hey, what do you think about helping us in this rediscovery project of actually determining exactly where the film site is? Because you guys explained that there were several people that thought it was at different locations, and that nobody could agree on exactly where it was.
Right. That was 2003. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. Obviously, that didn't happen right away. I jumped into finding Bigfoot, which lasted almost a month, I guess, when I started working on it and when we finished it. And then I think it was later that summer, we went down to the site, because actually on finding Bigfoot with Bob Gimlin, we went down to the film site, but we went down to just where Roger and Bob first had their sighting. We never crossed the creek and explored where Patty's Path was and where the last action that Roger did.
So basically, you made it to Hendon's X.
Yes.
And you guys never went to the upper sandbar. That would be where the film site is, the upper sandbar.
Correct. And at that time, when I was looking at it, I didn't think it was the film site. I was like, there's no way this is the film site. That looks nothing like what I see in the film.
Right.
It was a whole different look. And lo and behold, later on, they the reality of what's happened to the film site revealed itself, that it's just at that time was like 45, 46 years old or something like that.
Yeah,
somewhere.
2011, do the math, and from 1967.
So that's 6, yeah. So anyway, all it was the film site had just started to grow like nature does, trees all over the sandbar. Alders, firs, maples. They had already gotten established and were growing. The first time we all went down there and started walking through. I think the first time I was there is when we did the site measurement.
Yeah, that was in October, by mid-October we first started doing the grid map.
Yeah, the grid map. Yeah.
Ian couldn't make it, and I had two choices: double elimination or call a friend. So I gave you a call.
Yeah, and you guys had already put it in my ear about being a part of working on it, or at least trying to get me interested in where the site was. So that's really was my first immersion heavy with you guys, was the site survey.
Right.
And we jumped down there, and through what Bob said, we kind of established where we're going to start our grid, and we all kind of agreed that we should do a north-south, east-west grid plot.
Yeah.
And we started off measuring north to south, and from initial camera on, we went through the woods, which were extremely dense with branches, and we pulled our tape measure 386 feet, as I remember. That sticks in my head.
Start to that big maple tree in the background.
To the far background. And as we revealed that background trees is when I finally had my aha moment, which is, yes, those are the background trees in 352.
And the big thing for you was the crook in the maple, I kept hearing you say the crook in the maple.
Yeah, and there's a small maple tree. If you really look at frame 352, there's two variations of colors in the leaves that are in between the big tree and what do we call that? The other big tree, the second big tree.
Oh, we call it the middle tree.
Middle tree.
Yeah.
And we have vine maples, which are putting out a deeper red color, and then there was a broadleaf maple that was putting off a nice yellow glow that you see in 352. And that's there's a maple there.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I identified that maple, you can see that about 9 to 10 feet up the maple, it has a little bend in it. And when I saw that maple next to the big tree and saw that bend in it and the growth that it had, I was like, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that this is the array of background trees that are in 352.
So that was your eureka moment.
Yes.
As Daniel Perez says. When was your eureka moment? And that was yours.
Yeah.
You said something too that brought it to my attention. And you said, yeah, look, there's this leaning fir tree back here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a leaning fir tree. I go, wait a minute. A Dehendon aerial view of 1971. The upper right corner, there is a leaning tree in the background, and sure enough, there's this leaning tree.
Yeah, it's still leaning, and it's a pretty good sized fir tree that's it's still there.
Yeah, so
it's not evident in 352, but only in Dehendon's overview shot.
So most people really not using Dehendon's 1971 overview shot. They're focusing on 352. Like probably 95% of all the researchers are picking up this photograph, looking where Patty is standing, and looking where these trees are in the background, they're looking, seeing some stumps. And a lot of people have used that tool, but if you can't see the gravel bar, it's overgrown, how in the world are you going to find those other artifacts?
Right, and I think the Dehendon shot, not everybody had access to that picture, did they?
Well, it's in Murphy's book.
It is.
Yeah, it's in both books. So I don't know how many people have access to it, but definitely it's in the books.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that's true. But you utilize that to make all the correlations with the stumps, the debris piles, the trees.
Yeah.
That really was the key. 352 is just a supplement to me.
That's, we talk about this a lot, and people always use this big old pretty picture. Of course, not most of them are blurry because they're like third, fourth generations, but the 352 shot, they use that and they point at these artifacts. And I'm thinking, well, I seen that shot before. I was taken in 2007. I was taken to the upper sandbar by Cliff Rackman and James Beaufet. We walked on the upper sandbar along the base of the trees, climbing through a bunch of debris. Mm-hmm. And I remember them pointing out some trees to me and go, I think these are it. And I'm just looking at they look like trees to me. I mean, there's no connection. For me, 2007, there was no big connection for it. But I do remember there was a jungle out there, and that was hard to decipher that.
Yeah.
So for me, the artifacts were more helpful than the trees in the background.
Right, and that's what we needed. We needed something that survived the passage of time, because we can't depend on new trees that were in the way. The background trees is just the array that you're going to have to see. We needed something that was solid, and luckily fir stumps last a long time. Down fir logs last a long time. They don't decompose as quickly as the alders. All the alders that were on that site that were wiped out from the 67 flood had decomposed and rotted back into the ground, the ones that were dead. So yeah, through the course of our measuring that day, we spent a lot of time, and again, the importance of the film site slowly revealed itself as to this is the most, or I would say the best picture that we have of a supposed Bigfoot to date,
Right.
and we should get all the information we can get out of it. But that's a whole story that's already been told.
True. Now, let's visit that real quick here, because one of the factors we did in 2012 when we brought up Bill Munns, we brought up Daniel Perez, we didn't need them to tell us that was the site, but it helped confirm them because both of those parties, they'd never been there before.
True, and that was kind of what the 2012 get-together was for everybody to see our results and to do some confirmation for themselves. And they had their own measurements
Yes.
and investigations that they wanted to do, especially Bill Munns. And that he was very excited to get to the site and to get the measurements that he needed to finish his book. And in the course of 2 days, he did quite a bit of work. And yeah, he got the measurements he wanted. And through the course of the past 8-9 years, we've developed the site, so to say, and that we've cleared the site, that we can see better sight lines, we can get better measurements. We've done remeasurements since then, I think.
Yeah, when you say clear the site, just to make sure we're clear.
We're clearing the site of lower branches. We're letting trees that are growing well grow. There's a few trees that are, that are not well rooted and falling over that are in our sight line, and we do push those over. But we do establish a European style of forest management, in that we don't pick up all the sticks and pile them up. We just cut down the branches and let them lay on the ground below them, which means they'll decompose. As they decompose, they turn into less of a fire hazard, and then through the decomposition, they turn into fertilizer for the trees themselves.
Right, when you think about it, when we went out there and there's a horizon layer, or it's all horizon in terms of soils, would be like the organic material on the top. It's like the sand, bluish sand with gravel particulates, with a layer of organic material right over the top. And when we're looking at it, like, is that a pile of sand or is that a log? So you pull off a little bit, you could find sand underneath or determine the log positions.
Yeah, and you had to do that. We had to dig through and find some of those debris piles, as we call them.
Right.
And most of those that were still hanging in there had, there were fir logs that were down. But yes, over the like I said, the course of these 8 years, every summer we spend a little time maintaining the site and improving the visual lines and the walkability of the site, and just the general appearance that it's a mecca for Bigfooters to visit.
Yeah, just like the last weekend here, we had people coming in, dropping in, and like this one guy said, what is the chance of catching some of the guys who were instrumental in the rediscovery at the film site to give them a tour,
And that's the reason most of those people are coming to the site, because I think before that there was just a few zealots that kind of knew where it was, but they did not spend the time confirming that was a site. They just took it on assumption and that it looked right.
It looks right. I mean, quote unquote, seeing is believing, I understand, but at the physical evidence, that's what I needed, Yeah. I'm not the doubting Thomas, because my name's Robert, but I wanted to prove beyond reasonable doubt, because if I just jump on the bandwagon, this is the place, and by chance we're wrong, we look pretty silly on it.
Sure. And through your extensive efforts in mapping, and we had over 30 something artifacts that correlated with the 71 overview shot and frame 352.
There are a lot of artifacts that matches. We ran out of the alphabet.
Right.
I started going, well, let's go uppercase into lowercase, and then we always have numbers. But once we had enough to determine if there was a match there, I remember Stephen Stroyford came up and asked you, well, what do you think? He's always trying to, he was buying in a little bit earlier than us.
Mm-hmm.
He asked you, and I was ignoring him because I wanted to get the grid map done and stuff. And he kept, asking you, and well, do you think this is it? You think this is it? You think this is it? You said, I would find it hard for that in this area of mile area here to find anything that matches anything close to that. You remember saying that?
Well, yes, you can. I think that goes along with the maple. You can find maybe a few big trees that correlate and look similar, but once you have a third artifact in the background that has a distinctive characteristic to it, as the crook in the maple tree and the age difference that looks right, then you have more of a solid piece of evidence that you're in the right site. All the artifacts that you ended up obtaining through our grid plot and correlating with DeHenden's picture just solidified it, as far as on the ground. But after that site survey that day, I was pretty close to, I was 100% sure. I didn't have any doubt, really.
Yeah, I couldn't say it. I had to come back next weekend, and you were busy to do all the detail work to make sure all of that grid map was completed. And towards the end of the day, just before I went to bed, the sun was setting, and I'm by myself. Stephen had left, and I'm looking at those background trees, and I'm going, okay, there's a big tree. Peter Burns said it's got like woodpecker holes in it. Check. We go down the next tree, oh, look at this one. It looks like a giant maple tree. Rowdy talked about the crook. Look, it's there. Check. What's this leany tree thing in the background? Look, DeHenden 71. Like, it's there too. Yeah, check.
They're all there.
Middle tree. Check. The snag.
Pulkil.
Pulkil. Munns calls it the pulkil. Stephen likes the spiky snag.
Spiky snag.
Yeah.
And the spiky snag in the 352 lines up perfectly with what we call the smiley face.
Yeah.
Which is in front of Patty, but in actuality, when you're at the film site, the smiley face is at least 100 feet behind her, something like that.
That depth perception is a little off because when you measure it, it's like that stump. It's not the biggest stump out there. The bigger stump is just farther down.
Right.
It's 40 inches tall, and it's about 20 inches wide. And that's that artifact. And it was a tree that was alive, and evidently there's some damage to it, and it got scarred, and it started to heal, and then somebody cut it down. And so that's why I left that scar on the face of it. And from a distance, with not the best photos, it looks like a face, and that's how it got
did
the
back
smile.
then. And over the course of all those years, it's decomposed a little bit, but its characteristics are still there. And even each year, we find, I can't say we find something new every year, but recently we have found some new sight line evidence that corroborate that we are in the right spot. And also, in turn, as we've site cleared, we've improved our visual observation of what 352 would be, and we've noticed and redone Roger Patterson's 352 position to more of a precise location. And we've also found a new fir stump branch that's in the foreground that lines up perfectly with a smiley face.
Right.
It actually sits right under smiley face, and we discovered that, 2 years ago?
2 years ago,
Yeah.
2000, I think it was 2018.
Yeah.
Perez was up that day too.
Well, I think we discovered it before Perez was there, or was it the same day?
The same day.
I think it was the same day.
Yeah.
I noticed it as we were doing some recreation. I'm like, there's this
That thing's in the way.
This fir branch here that, and we had the still of 352, and and I'm like, that's a pretty big fir log. What happened to that? And still there. Wait a second, there's that branch that's in the foreground, just right under the smiley face.
It's a
so
it's
that
a
third
4-inch diameter thing sticking up.
Yeah.
I'd say it's about almost like 12 inches long.
Yeah,
And about
somewhere
4
around
inches wide, so it's substantial. It's not like a little branch sticking out. I just want
Correct.
the listeners to get a better
and what that
understanding.
did, and what we'll continue to do with that, is we got to figure out how much that's decomposed and how much it sank, so we can get exactly the height of where Patterson was filming at.
Right.
So with that foreground fir branch, the smiley face, we can start moving up and down our camera to make sure we're in the exact same spot. So when we do our second recreation with a similar camera and with film, we'll be in more of a precise location. And I think when we get to that point, we're going to have to probably build a little bit of a platform sticking out, bring down a little bit of equipment so we can get a more secure location. Maybe just that ladder is like we're talking about, but in our recreation, that's what's hard, is we have to run up the bank after that to get to his third position.
Right.
And his fourth position is easy, but going from 352 position, which is the longest, most stable shot that he had, and gives us more of the complete picture of the creature, we might have to build a little platform, because over the course of the years, the bank on the creek is eroded away, which at that time I think was probably several feet behind where his position was.
I think so
still.
too.
So he had already run up the bank and then situated himself to get 352. So that there's still information and things that we can pull from the site as we move along. And each year we do a little more maintenance and we do a little more investigation, and hopefully one day we can figure out exactly how tall that creature was, and exactly how far away she was and her path. And that's what we're working on right now, is continuing to improve the information we have on the film site.
Yeah, we're going to talk about cameras just a bit, because I know that's your forte of yours. But I want to go back and let the listeners know how we know exactly where Roger's position was. Because we had Renee DeHinden had taken some measurements from different stumps, and due to triangulation, determined where Roger's 352 position based on the 352 picture. So we measured from those exact positions, those stump positions, and we know exactly where Roger is based on those. And it's about, would you say about 6 foot from his position? About 6 foot of the upper sandbar is missing, or where he was,
If not more.
Yeah.
If not, yeah, from where he was, it's probably about 6 feet to that, yep. And again, we're riding on the backs of previous investigators who were at the site taking those measurements. I don't think any of this could have been obtained
Right.
without those measurements. So to carry on Bigfoot investigations, that's what people need to do. They need to continue to take meticulous notes when something does happen, take measurements. If somebody has a sighting, you need to start putting in notes of where you were at, good solid objects that you can measure from to obtain consistent numbers. And so future, because those guys probably had that in their mind, that they'd taken those measurements, somebody might need those one day. That's the only reason I could think of, because it really didn't get investigated much after that. People came and probably looked at it, and I guess people visited it over the years.
Yeah.
But nobody really put in the work that we did since the initial investigation of that site by Green and DeHinden. Even Titmus was there.
Yes.
Checking things out.
So it's like a lot of things that happen. Situation goes down, people get excited. After a while, they start forgetting. It fades. Somebody has to bring it back up again. That was our job, I guess. Satisfy the 2000, the big confusion of 2003, to bring it back. Yeah. Let's talk about camera stuff now. In 2012, after we got done helping Bill Munns do his thing, and everybody kind of had their own project, Prez was there, you were there, Ian were there, Bobo was your stunt double, and you guys were trying to use a camera very similar to the one that was used.
Yeah, Perez has a K100, but it's a turret K100, which holds 3 lenses. And you can turret to whatever lens selection you put on there. I think Daniel just has 2 lenses. He has the 15 and the 25. Now, the 2012, Daniel just kind of set it up and had Bobo walk by.
Mm-hmm.
He was more trying to compare the length of that piece of wood.
He had 2x4.
Yeah,
that's still at the site if you want to see it.
Yeah, it's wedged between 2 trees because
and it's stuck
grown.
now
it's
because
stuck
the trees
now.
are
It's not
growing.
going anywhere.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, his recreation attempt, so to say, was very rudimentary. It didn't really work. It didn't offer any information, I don't think, and I don't think he even developed it.
No.
I don't even know if he knew how to load that camera, and that's probably what happened. He didn't load it right.
Right.
But when we did it in 2018,
Right.
October 18, he brought his camera back. I had film left over from college. Reversal, it was only black and white, but it's still the same frame. It's still going to give us the same information as far as size and ratio of everything. So I had been to film school. I knew how to load 17 or 16 millimeter cameras.
Yeah.
I've loaded quite a few of them, and we got a good load on it, and we got a good roll, and we got it developed. We got a video copy of it, and we did the comparison with Kip Morrow.
How tall is Kip? Talk about.
Kip is about 6'4". He's a little taller than I am, and Kip's probably, I don't want to say how much Kip weighs, but he's a bigger guy than I am, and he has a nice gait and a walk, and the location is very dark. We have a lot of trees there now, so we had the camera wide open. I thought it might be a little overexposed, so I had it developed a half a stop under is what we do. But in turn, after we got it developed, we should have just left it at that complete exposure. Needless to say, we put Kip in a white jacket so we can see the silhouette of him, and we did see him pretty well. Now, from Roger's 352 position, we do not have a direct view to where Patty was at 352 due to the alders that have grown up, and I think it's also a maple. It's kind of blocking that view. So we went ahead and timed out the film, and we did not start the recreation until his settling before 352. I imagine that was around probably around frame 280 or 290 is when he settled in and gets the stable footage. Mm-hmm. So we started our recreation from there. We timed it out, and I did all the same movements that Roger did into the same positions that we had assessed. We definitely assessed where 352 was more precisely. And we did the recreation with the 15 millimeter. We did it with the 25 millimeter. And then we got it back, and through my, I would say crude, but we had the complete frame. I compared the overall frame to Roger's frame, and the 25 millimeter, which I've always had trouble with, put Kip Morrell bigger than Patty, which I don't think is right. The 15 millimeter put Kip considerably smaller than Patty. So my assumption, if I'm assuming Bob Gimlin was a good judge of size and weight, that I agree with Munns that it's not conclusive, but a 20 millimeter lens might have been what Roger had on his no turret camera. It was a fixed lens, but the same camera. So that's something that we're going to do again and try to get the good exposure, and probably put Kip into a complete white bodysuit, so we can see the overall shape of him all the way through. We did get some good shots, and we did that comparison of his size to 352 probably 2 steps before, where we had a clear visual sight, and that's kind of where we're at right now. As we improve our our line of sight through our limbing of the trees, we'll eventually have some background markers that we can start putting either lights on or have some measurements so we know that we're in the proper frame size that the same lens that he used. So once we get those background trees enough visual, we'll be able to see that this frame matches certain way up maple or certain way up the big tree, and also the sides. That's going to be a little more difficult because of our growth. But those are just things that's going to take patience and the trees growing and us just continue to limb trees to get to that. So again, the site itself will continue to be investigating this for years to come.
Yeah, when I always look at, I've mentioned the smiley stump that's way in the foreground, that's 40 inches tall and about 20 inches wide. When I look at that and I look at Patty, it makes me think that Patty is actually smaller than a lot of people are saying.
But that's also something that happens. You see all these pictures that people take of the moon with the trees in the foreground.
Yes.
And that's a compression thing. So you really can't compare those sizes. You can, but it's more of a visual effect that makes that stump look bigger as compared to Patty.
Which is tough because everybody's trying to figure out how tall Patty is. There's actually a mathematical formula that if you knew the distance and you knew the aperture length of the camera, you could determine size of individual. How does that work?
It's not so much aperture; it's the lens, just lens size.
Okay.
Yeah. And the camera you have. Every camera, even though you can put a 15 millimeter on. You'd say it's a 15 millimeter. Every camera has a little different focal length and where it hits the lens, so it's going to give you a little different size with different cameras. But we were trying to use the same camera, and that's something else too. Maybe the turret and the fixed lens camera have a little different length to them, which may give us a little different size. But in turn, if that's the problem, then I'm back to a 15 millimeter, and you have to go into the logic of what kind of lens are you going to take into the field and what kind of film speed. Film speed doesn't matter to me that much as far as how fast the creature walks. We're pretty confident he did not shoot at 24 frames per second. And the reason for that, if I was going out with a limited supply of film to shoot as much as I could, I would not want a fast speed, which would be a 24, because that camera offered 24, 18, and 16. I would want a slower frame rate. That way I got more out of my film instead of it running out, which it did on those guys at the very end.
So
it would have run out quicker, probably considerably quicker if he'd been shooting in 24 all day. So, but the difference between a 16 and an 18 frame per second shot is not going to be that noticeable as far as how fast the creature walks. But 24 to 16 or 18 is a considerable difference as far as speed. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not real concerned about how fast she walked or whatever. That's not that big a deal. It's more of how big the creature is,
right,
and the width and where she walked. So
the film looks like she's walking faster or whatever.
If you played at 24, she's walking too fast. But when you played at 18 or 16, it looks again more natural, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. Is people always talk about how blurry a picture is, but people forget that it's from a movie frame, and she is a smaller thing in the movie frame.
And honestly, it's not blurry, because with if you had a 15 or a 20 millimeter lens, there's quite a depth of field of focus in that. And a lot of people say it's overexposed, but I disagree. If it was not overexposed, we would not have the definition of the dark creature that's seen in the film, because the whole sandbar was white. If it got exposed for the white sandbar, we'd have no definition in the latitude from that light to the darkness of the creature. So the slight overexposure of the sandbar added to the detail that we see, especially in the still prints that come out of it. of the creature and the fur and what I see as muscle striation and tendons and fur rubs. I see a hackle rise too as she moves along. And when she realizes that they're coming across the creek towards her, just like an animal, and that was one of the first things that when you and Steven and I were talking at that BFRO, I noticed in the still frames in Murphy's book, I'm like, did you see that the hackles on her rise from top of her neck all the way down to the middle of her back, which you don't see in the early frames. And I think that's just from what an animal does when they stress out a little bit, that she's exiting, think everything's going good, but then these guys keep approaching on her and then actually cross the creek coming at her.
And one time pretty close to that, Bob gets off the horse, then gets back on the horse again.
Yeah. And his approach, and I think the turn and look is when Bob was coming across the creek.
Yeah, it's like, this isn't good.
Yeah, this isn't good. These guys are not retreating, they're approaching towards me. So there's just general animal characteristics that lend it to be an authentic creature, not a guy in a costume to me.
Yeah, every time I watch it, I'm looking for the zipper and the price tag every time.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think the zipper, they call it the zipper, and that's actually what it was. It's just her hackles are rising from stress.
Yeah, and
like animals, and even we do. You know, when you get scared
hair
or you feel like something comes, that's a muscle reaction up and down your back. I don't know the physiology of it and why we do it, but I think for dogs, I think it's more of, it makes me look bigger.
It stands up too. When they get all
their
pissed
dogs
off.
when their hair stands
the
up.
hackles come up.
Yeah, hackles come up. I think it's more of, I'm bigger than I am kind of look. Maybe, but I don't know the physiology of that. And it'd be fun to explore that and find out who's done any research on why animals rise their hackles.
I'm going to change the subject, but you
do it. We've talked about this.
Yeah, you do a lot of filming, and you've been a movie scout, film scout. You've been a fixer. You've been a few other things. You've been a fixer. You've been been involved in movies a lot. You've been involved with a lot of Bigfoot movies too. You assisted with. Instead of me saying it, why don't you just, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh yeah, well, Bigfoot movie is what kind of got me into this whole Bigfoot lore. I'm a location manager and scout, and I can produce and all that, but location and managing is what I typically do. And I got the call to work on a found footage Bigfoot movie, horror movie called Bigfoot: The Lost Coast Tapes.
And you actually were in that thing.
It was, but I wasn't initially cast to be in that thing. But during the course of that whole movie, we brought Bobo on actually to just do security. But they were also creating a costume for a guy who was big enough to play a Bigfoot, and he was going to be in the film. The costume itself was not ready during the film. Mm-hmm. So it never really had a good showing in the film, but in turn, when Bobo was there, he started helping the guy learn how to walk more like a Bigfoot, or at least what Bobo assumes a Bigfoot looks like,
Bobo
or
style.
walks. Yeah, and I was already acquaintance of Bobo from college, and just the scene around Arcata and Southern Humboldt, and he told us he'd already started working on finding Bigfoot. They'd shot a few episodes, and after that movie, I got the call for that first Finding Bigfoot show.
I got to interrupt here. You actually, in this movie, you actually did your own stunt.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Let's talk about that.
So they had an actor who was going to play, the character's name is LaRoche, who is kind of a secondary character who is helping out the main character with whatever going on with this Bigfoot. And you have to watch the movie to discern all this. I don't want to go in and try to explain the movie. But the one actor that they had was an older gentleman, and the people that had written this script had written it for Humboldt County. And he was not really in touch with what kind of characters are in Humboldt County. He was creating some characters kind of out of his mind instead of what kind of character would be floating around in Humboldt County. And my character ended up arising because the director and that actor had a conflict, and I was already in one of these scenes, this actual scene of a news conference, which didn't make it into the film because of that other actor. But they said I looked like the part enough, and they said, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm already doing all these other things for this film. I might as well do it." But that actor had to do some stunts, and they actually had a guy that was going to be a stunt double. But once I got into the role, they saw that I was physically fit enough to do this, what we call a hydraulic pull, where you get sucked through a window. And I got to do it, I think, 3 times. The last time we actually used a balsa wood breakaway window, and I busted through the window. But my character in the movie is the guy that's kind of protecting everybody in the background. You never really see him much. He's floating around trying to protect everybody and do his thing, and he gets injured, and I'm sitting in a room, and then I get up, and the lady comes back in, and I get sucked out the window. Like I was telling Tate, you really don't know if I'm dead or not. You know, I just get sucked out a window. Those guys, whatever was trying to kill me, didn't kill me the first time because they rescued me. Anyway, that film got me into Bigfoot.
Yeah, I know you're going to hate me to ask you this, but what was the title again?
Bigfoot, The Lost Coast Tapes.
Check it out.
Good luck trying to find it.
I found you can buy it on Amazon.
Buy it on Amazon. There we go.
Thanks, Tate. Hey, so, but you also, I mean, you've actually been helping out Finding Bigfoot a few times.
Yes, I did Finding Bigfoot, the first Birth of the Legend. That's what sucked me into that. And actually, after that show, they offered me advanced producer, where I was going to be gone doing all the advanced producing. Well, what they do is they do a leapfrog. They have 2 advanced producers. One goes and starts to establish, and the other one goes to the next location. But I was more into film at the time, and I had a budding family, and I did not want to get into that because I had gotten out of the film industry as far as traveling in the film industry, because I got married and I had kids, and I just didn't want to be traveling all the time. And I think that was the main reason I did not fall into the advanced producer. But every time Finding Bigfoot came back to my neck of the woods, Shasta, they came back to Humboldt 2 more times. I was their local fixer producer.
Yeah.
I also did the local producer for $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty,
Which was filmed in this area.
Yes, we filmed in the Bluff Creek region. I established some of their routes. One of their challenges was to follow Roger and Bob's expedition from their camp up to where they met Patty. And actually, Robert, you came on and became a consultant that day, as far as a helper when we had everybody here.
Thing.
It was a safety thing, but also you were, the quintessential expert. You and I, but you especially, because you had done all the map work, was a quintessential expert on the Patterson-Gimlin site, and you got to walk up a few of the contestants.
I got to meet him. That was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting, and of course we laughed at it that these guys were put out 6 hours every day and were expected to find Bigfoot evidence, where people were spending years and months and not finding anything. So we thought, obviously it was kind of I wouldn't say a joke, but they weren't going to find any Bigfoot evidence in that short amount of time. So they created other things. And I don't want to get into promoting $10 million Bigfoot bounty,
but I did get to meet Michael Merchant on that one.
Michael Merchant, yeah.
He used me as evidence on the way up.
Yeah, he should have.
I made it to the commercial break.
And we had our game cameras already out.
That's right, we captured them.
And I offered that if any of those guys found our game cameras, they could utilize any footage that was on there as evidence to promote their competition and that they were going to win. But none of them found our cameras.
Our grid map that we made,
yeah.
I guess the one group had won it in an earlier session, and they had the GPS locations on it and a bunch of other
They did.
artifacts.
They did.
And they still didn't find it.
They still didn't find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't get up to that site because they found out that that was a pretty long expedition from their campsite, Roger and Bob's, up to the film site. It was a pretty long expedition. And that whole area that they did, there's no roads, there's no cell service, fairly remote. We've done that trip. You've done it more than anybody, hiking up the creek. And but it turned out to be one of their better challenges. And I forgot. I think Stacy Brown won that competition.
Yeah, Michael Merchant should have won it because he interviewed somebody who helped reestablish the film site.
Right.
That would be the best evidence yet. But no, we can't have that. Yeah, there's been a couple other things too that year. Because I guess Finding Bigfoot did their 99th episode here, and they did some earlier episodes here. So
yeah, we did Bobo's Backyard, and then we did the final episode of Finding Bigfoot, the last 2-hour special that they did.
yeah, that was fun.
And I also worked on a Shasta 2-hour special, the paranormal Bigfoot. And that was fun. It was just nice being in Shasta and meeting a lot of people. And that's the benefit of working on Finding Bigfoot, is as an advanced producer or a fixer, we get to interview all the people that potentially can be on the show. So we've been through quite a few individuals, went and talked to them before the show, got their accounts, and narrowed it down to a few people that we're like, okay, this is what the team should go and investigate. This is where they should go. This is a credible sighting, or we have 2 credible sightings that were within a few miles of each other. And I think that was the biggest benefit to that show. Wasn't so much the exploits of the team going out and doing their investigations. It was all the witnesses in the different towns that came forward to tell their side of the story or their account. And yes, some of those people were very credible because they were woodsmen, or they had experience in the woods and knew the difference between howls, or knew it wasn't a bear or something like that. But yeah, the show itself definitely kept me in the Bigfoot world, and the characters and the family and the camaraderie that you develop with a crew, is obviously with our Bluff Creek Project, but that whole crew that's on Finding Bigfoot and the Bigfoot community it's an interesting, lively, diverse.
You've got the word entertaining.
There we go. That's the final word. Group of people.
Yeah, and you're also involved with the Bluff Creek Project. Yeah, we used to call it I was calling it the Camera Project.
The Camera Project,
Yeah.
yes. And that arose after the 2012, when we brought Bill Munns, Bart Catino, Bobo, Cliff.
17 of us.
17 of us total. Todd Hale, Terry Smith, Tom Yamaron, I'm forgetting a bunch of people.
Marcatino.
We were all there, and one night, of course, we were all camping at Louse. We all had to do a night investigation, so Bart and I were in my red truck. You and your son were in your rig, and I think Todd Hale and Steven were in another rig.
Right.
So we had 3 rigs going up to Onion Lake, and this was approximately 11:30 at night. I think we arrived at Onion Lake.
This is just getting off the longest day of the year, so still lots of light.
Yeah,
Still
lots of
getting
light.
light about late 8 something.
Yeah, we didn't leave till probably after dark here. In fact, we left after dark here. So that was 10:30. Well, we didn't get up there. The whole way up, Bart was therming out the window.
Right.
As I was the lead vehicle. But we pulled into Onion, and Onion Lake is a fairly secluded lake on top of one of the ridges around the Bluff Creek drainage. And there's only one way into Onion Lake, and there's only one way out. We pulled in what we call the roundabout at the bottom next to the lake, and Bart and I were the first ones out of the rig. And as soon as we stepped out of the rig, there was already a call going on. And I described it as the typical Bobo call, the long extended call. And it was what I say was reverberating off of Onion back towards us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was obviously in a different location. It was so loud it was bouncing off. Both Bart and I were just like, God, that's either a perfect replication or somebody's up here, or that's what you would call a Bigfoot howl. And also, like I said, there was no other cars, nobody else was up there. There was no sign of anybody camping. I guess somebody could have been over on the top of the world, but I think that's a little too far away for us to hear something like that.
And no cars in that general area. It's a
No
long way to
cars.
walk
We
to be there.
didn't see anything. So Bart and I, later on, he had his therm, I just had a sound recorder. We made a walk down this decommissioned logging road, and we had one incident where something felt like somebody threw a 50-pound rock on the ground. It stopped Bart and I in our tracks. Nothing else happened that night. But the following week, Jamie had some. We'd already hooked up with Jamie. Jamie was at the 2012, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was there.
Yeah. And he had some game cameras. And I was like, hey, we should put those game cameras up there. He was wanting to get some cameras out. And I said, I want to go back and find out where that trail was above us, and try to find out if there was a rock or something somewhere that got picked up and displaced. I didn't find any evidence of any rocks being picked up or dropped. I did find enough rocks that could have sufficed to make that thudding sound, a very deep sound that hit the ground. It actually did not show up on the voice recorder or on the sound recorder, but you can hear both Bart and I stop in our tracks and look and say, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
You know, because it was one of those extremely quiet nights, and the most quiet places I've ever been are on top of mountains, and actually on top of Onion
Mountain.
I was there with you on I think it was that BFRO expedition. We all
Yeah,
went
we
and
spent
sat.
some quality time up there.
Yes, and it's super quiet when there's no wind, because sound does not travel up a mountain. So when there's no wind, unless somebody's making tons of sound along that ridge or somewhere a little bit below that ridge, you don't hear anything. Anyway, I established a few cameras along that trail that I found above Bart and I, and Jamie had made these stakes to put in the ground.
Yeah.
And I put it in a nice slopes area, and I think I came back 2 weeks later, and we had some just incredible bear footage. And Jamie's like, hey, why don't we put these at the film site and start just a camera project?
And that way, then the rest is history.
The rest is history as far as our camera project. And we put them in and service them every year. At that time, our cameras were not lasting through the 8-month closure that happened here in Bluff Creek due to the Port Orford mitigation process that they're trying to do. So our batteries would die probably halfway through the winter, and we'd come back and look at the footage. I think it was probably 3 or 4 years later, lithium batteries came out, and we realized that those lithium batteries would make those cameras last throughout the whole winter. And in turn, we've got literally thousands of videos of cougars and bears. Probably just 1,000 videos of just bears easily over these past 9 years, and several hundred videos of cougars. And we also found this strange little rodent, weasel-looking thing hopping around, and Jamie looked into it and figured out that it was a Humboldt martin, which they thought was extinct. Or close to extinct, because nobody had found any evidence since I think 1994 or 95.
It's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare. So lo and behold, after some analysis and some confirmation of with some scientists or some biologists, I should say, they said yes, that's a Humboldt martin, and we've gotten video and pictures of a breeding pair at the film site actually. And actually, a few of our other cameras have found them at different locations.
Which is pretty cool, because they actually declared that
that species in California to be a protected species.
Right, right, and that species was negatively impacted to the point of them thinking it was extinct, mainly through clear-cut logging.
Yeah, timber harvest plants.
Yeah,
It affects
yeah.
timber harvest plants because they like old growth
Yes.
type environment.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I got a few more questions to ask you. I know I'm not going to ask you all the pictures, of different animals, but I know we have a sex reel that we have, from the cameras, but we also have some awesome mountain lion activities,
Uh-huh.
calling back and forth to each other, and some playful actions. And
Yeah. Well, our cameras are kind of in a line, and it follows a major game trail, which is actually our trail, and to the film site, and we've got a great chronological. What would you say? Chronological connection of these two cougars following each other. One's a male, one's a female, and they're just the female's in heat, and the male's following her behind. We've also early in the camera project got a mama and her kits, and over the course, I think 2 or 3 years, we saw the kits grow.
right, that's the
And-
neat thing about having the cameras here, 24/7.
Yes.
They're creatures of habit. They repeat themselves. Bears like to follow the same pathways. Mountain lions are on rotational basis. They move through an area and they come back around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really neat to see all that footage.
And we have some very distinct bears that come through
We
quite
had,
often.
we had one that had a tag in his ear.
Yeah, a few years ago we've had 2 tagged bears. One was actually 3-legged, and that kind of blew us away when we saw that there was a tagged, collared, 3-legged bear hopping through Bluff Creek.
Jamie told me the story on that. We already interviewed him and got the story that he followed up on that.
Yeah, the biologist that tagged that bear actually got a hold of us and wanted all the footage that we had of him. And
He said he was shot near Wichipec or Pequan or somewhere down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were kind of disappointed that Bluff Creek was the depository for a problem there, but that we haven't got, except for that one year, that we have not got any tagged bears since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. One of them definitely was taken by a hunter. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's out of the picture.
Yeah.
But
okay.
for capita for bears, there's a lot of bears here,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of cats here.
Well, I think it's considered the most bear-populated area in California, isn't it?
It's one of them,
Yeah.
and there's lots to eat.
Yeah.
That's the neat thing about the habitat. Which brings me to my next question: is do you think a Bigfoot creature still exists in the Bluff Creek Range?
Well, we've gone back and forth with this. I think the biggest impact to the Bluff Creek drainage was the '64 flood. Before the '64 flood, Bluff Creek was a major steelhead and coho habitat, and they would be spawning here in their allotted times, October through January, and they could not make that run after the '64 flood because of what happened here at the Bluff Creek with the blown out section that made it too steep for those salmon to get back up. Now there was attempts for ladders to be put in, but per Dick Levine, those ladders were washed out over the year.
Yeah.
And
Dick-
so I
Dick
think-
Levin is one of our
Yeah.
resource guy, a biologist that was working.
He was a hydrologist, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah, and he worked for the Forest Service in the late '70s,
Yeah.
mid to late '70s here in the Bluff Creek area. Who's a whole nother story, and hopefully you interview Dick one day.
Like to.
But he gave us great information on that. But what you're getting at is, what was the attraction for Bigfoot to come to Bluff Creek? Well, prior to '58, there was no roads even attempting to come into Bluff Creek. There was some old family hunting areas where they'd probably horse in or mule pack in or hike in to different hunting camps. But other than that, the Bluff Creek drainage was really one of the last untapped lumber areas in California. This whole Northern California area is really undiscovered, so to say, or unadulterated by humans. So maybe in '67 there was still thought in the Bigfoot community that there might be fish still here. Maybe that's what Patty was doing in that water, is, why is there no fish here?
And
because October is when you start getting some runs of fish, especially after a rain.
We just hiked up the Bluff Creek drainage over towards where the junction of the North Fork and the Main Fork is, and we saw lots of fish.
Yes, yeah.
Underwater, and we haven't seen this many ever. So
no, we haven't, and that was one of my first observations when we started coming to Bluff Creek, is I never saw any fish in the water. None that were noticeable. But with some underwater photography that we've done recently, we've discovered that most of the deep pools have a school of fish in different various size. And I'd like to find out exactly what kind of fish they are. Somebody was fishing here with us here recently, and he caught one, and he says he thinks it's a rainbow.
Residential trout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll take some of the video that I got recently and show some of the anglers that I know that are pretty competent, and see what they have to say about it, or maybe find some biologists. But in turn, what we're getting at is, I think you got to follow the food sources, and as food sources, something like salmon drying up or not being here, probably eventually got around that this wasn't a place to come get your salmon anymore. Even though that we see all the berries that are growing.
Yeah.
On our trip the last 2 days, we had 4 different variants of berries that were in ripening condition, and we ate all of those, that we'd see.
We'd eaten all of those. We
Not
had
all
plenty
of
for the animal.
We tried all of those. Yes, we
We
tried
sampled.
all of them. We
sampled them.
We had red huckleberries. We have salmon berries. We didn't see any thimbleberries. Usually we see thimbleberries, but they're up a little bit higher.
And they're not quite ready, I don't think, yet.
Yeah, and we had wild strawberries, which there's one right there next to you. You sat on it. Right next to you down there. Right under your leg right there.
There it is. There it is.
So
They're already done. You see, they're missing. They're gone. They already took them. And so basically, the question was, there is plenty to feed.
There is
a bunch of bears.
There is,
and support a mountain lion population, large bear population.
Yeah.
So you think it's possible to support a Bigfoot population?
I think so. I think population-wise, that goes on to whatever your theory is of how Bigfoot live, and being a top predator or primate, I imagine they rotate around to all the different food sources as they become plentiful. And walking the ridge lines is the way I would get around out here. And the only reason to go down into the creek is to get water or to get a protein source, and maybe eat the berries along the way. But everything north of Bluff Creek is prime habitat, I believe. Salmon, all over the north coast and the west coast of America are in decline and having trouble. But this is kind of what we end up always when we come for the first time back to Bluff Creek. Is Bluff Creek is reestablished itself with lots of animals. There's no more logging. The water always runs clean. Berry populations, mushroom populations, all the flora is doing well. In turn, once you got your flora doing well, your fauna is going to do well. And the 8 months that this area is actually being closed now has turned this, I think, back into a decent animal sanctuary, and hopefully the return of Bigfoot.
Good. So I would say your final answer, yes.
Yes.
I get a yes. I'm almost done. Just a couple more questions on you. And best Bigfoot evidence would you say is out there?
The best Bigfoot evidence is out there. I think we're working on it right now. It's still the 67 film and the tracks that they obtained. It's one thing for those guys to put on a good suit and make a good showing on a film. It's another thing to have prints that are as detailed as what they cast, and if it is a hoax, I think that's even a better story. That's an incredible story for two cowboys from Yakima
To pull that one off.
to pull off a suit that good that can show muscle definition.
Right.
The wearing of the side of your fur from walking, the gait in which he takes, the ability not to look down. But it's all a great story, and we'll continue to investigate it for the
Excellent.
coming years.
Yeah. And the only last thing I want to share with you is, if you had the opportunity to make a Bigfoot movie, how would you do it? What would be your emphasis on it?
Emphasis on a Bigfoot movie? I'm laughing because I think the movie I was in, I go back to the Bigfoot, the Lost Coast tapes, which is a found footage movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is incredibly confusing, and you have no idea really what happened during the whole movie. I think a narrative to explain what happened during that movie with a backstory of LaRoche being the main character, where the Bigfoot baby body would be a start. But ultimately, I think the movie to make is about Roger Patterson and just his life and what led him into being obsessed with Bigfoot. Not necessarily what happened during the film, but just his general character and the characters that were around him and the situations that arose that led him to go to Bluff Creek. And I think that's more of a movie I'd like to see made.
Because you always said that Roger Patterson was a pretty unique character.
Yes, he's the perfect imperfect character.
Yeah.
And
For what's going on.
yes.
And he is, like, not to put a plug in for Greg Long's book, but he got in a lot of detail about, he was athletic, he was in the Army, he was strong, he did it, and very creative.
Yeah.
Very creative.
Yeah. And his relationship with Bob Gimlin is interesting, and how he convinced Bob to go on these expeditions with him and spend that time. That's something I still want to ask Bob Gimlin is, what did you guys do for your birthday? Because you were out there on your birthday. Did you even know it was your birthday?
I forgot, too busy.
What did you do?
Yeah.
Did you know you were going to be gone that long during your birthday?
All good stuff.
It is all good stuff, and like I said, we'll continue to investigate the film site and hopefully pull more information out about it.
Actually, I appreciate it. I want to say this one last thing here. We're actually filming at Louse Camp, and we're filming in the position the tent was set up, in the tent scene in the Willow Creek
And
movie.
the Willow Creek film.
Just to throw that out there.
Which that came around after the 2012 4 days that we had in the woods with everybody showing in the site. I was dead tired, did not want to work for free on that, so I encouraged Robert Leiterman to be a part of that.
Here you go, sucker.
And Robert Leiterman, was I think one of the guys that really made the end of that film work, and he gave him a lot of good ideas and probably gave him the narrative at the end that made that film be the success that it was.
Except for the very
congratulations, Robert.
Except for the last part of the film, I didn't consult. I was
Well,
not a consultant in the last part of the film.
That's Bobcat's. He already had that in his head.
Figured
I
out.
think, that Bigfoot goes around and establishes his harem of missing women.
That explains everything. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate it. And again, this is with the Bluff Creek Project. We're doing the podcasting out in the field and interviewing people out in the field versus doing it over the phone or in a stuffy office. So I like this approach. It's kind of fun. I enjoy it.
And some of this is repetitive, but there might be some new stuff in there.
Maybe.
We're
Well,
good.
thank you.
All right, buddy.
Enjoy.
That's good.
Thanks.
Yeah.